Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku become captain of Navy submarine. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The ocean did not care about quirks. At 800 feet below the surface of the Pacific, the crushing pressure of the deep was the great equalizer. It didn't matter if you could breathe fire, shatter concrete, or run at the speed of sound. If the hull breached, the ocean would squeeze the life out of you in a fraction of a second, turning the strongest hero into nothing more than organic debris. Captain Izuka Midoriya loved that about the deep. Depth? Midoriya asked, his voice low, barely rising above the hum of the ventilation scrubbers. 850 feet, sir. Holding steady, came the clipped, robotic response from the helm. Midoriya stood at the con, the raised platform in the center of the control room of the JDS Delaware. He was not an imposing figure physically. His uniform, the pristine whites of the Maritime Self-Defense Force, hung slightly loose on his frame, and his unruly green hair was the only thing out of regulation, though he kept it short enough to pass inspection. He didn't have the towering muscularity of All Might or the intense, burning presence of Endeavor. He had something else. He had stillness. In the redlit gloom of the control room, rigged for dark operations to preserve the crew's night vision and reduce electrical load, Midoriya's eyes scanned the waterfall displays of the sonar monitors. Contact bearing 210, said a voice from the sonar station. Lieutenant Ochako Uraraka didn't look at the captain. Her eyes were closed, her fingertips pressing gently against the glass of her monitors. Her quirk, zero gravity, had evolved. Through intense training at the Naval Academy, she had learned to float not just objects, but her own sensory perception, casting her consciousness into the acoustic net of the ship. She could feel the sound waves hitting the hull. Classification biological. Whale pod. Non-threat. Very good, Lieutenant Midoriya murmured. He checked his watch. Time to target window? 4 minutes to intercept, replied his executive officer, Commander Tenya Ida. Ida stood beside the plotting table, his posture so rigid he looked like he was bolted to the deck plates. His glasses reflected the tactical map. The drone submarine Akula should be passing through Sector 7 shortly. Simulation parameters are set to live fire protocols. Good, Midoriya said. He walked to the periscope stand, though there was no reason to raise it at this depth. He just needed to pace. Let's see if the upgrades to the fire control system are worth the budget headache. Captain, a rough, gravelly voice cut through the disciplined air. Lieutenant Commander Katsuki Bakugo sat at the weapons control station, his legs kicked up on the console, a toothpick rolling between his teeth. The glow of the targeting screens illuminated his permanent scowl. Stop pacing, you damn nerd. You're making the deck squeak. Posture, weapons officer. Ida snapped, chopping his hand through the air. You are on the bridge of a warship. I'm on a tin can surrounded by death, Bakugo retorted, not moving his legs. And I'm waiting for something to kill. Deku, are we shooting or dancing today? Midoriya stopped. He looked at Bakugo. Years ago, the nickname Deku had been an insult. A reminder of his quirklessness. Now, it was his call sign. It was the name whispered with fear by smugglers and villains who thought the ocean was a lawless safe haven. We're hunting Kaken, Midoriya said calmly. And in a hunt, patience is the weapon. Patience is boring, Bakugo grunted, finally dropping his feet and sitting up as his console beeped. Contact. Bearing 090. Fast mover. It's the drone. The atmosphere in the con shifted instantly. The lethargy of patrol vanished. Every spine straightened. Every hand hovered over controls. Designate target Master 1, Midoriya ordered, his voice sharpening. Helm, come right, steer course 095. Match speed. Silent running. Aye, Captain. Right full rudder. Turns for 15 knots. Sonar, Midoriya said. Give me a solution. Uraraka's brow furrowed. It's quiet, Captain. New propulsion drive. I'm getting cavitation on the screw, but it's faint. Range, 6,000 yards. Weapons, Midoriya turned to Bakugo. Spin up tubes 1 and 2. Standard warheads. Do not open outer doors until my mark. Tubes 1 and 2 flooding, Bakugo grinned, a feral expression that looked demonic in the red light. Finally, the JDS Delaware was a Ghost-class stealth submarine, the most advanced vessel in the Allied fleet. It didn't rely on brute force, it relied on invisibility. But today was a stress test. They were testing a new batch of torpedoes, the Type 88 Smash variants. Target is changing course, Uraraka called out, her voice straining. It detected us? It's going evasive. Zigzag pattern. It shouldn't have heard us, Ida noted, concerned. We are running on the battery. We are a hole in the water. Thermal layer, Midoriya muttered, his mind racing through the calculus of the ocean water outside. We crossed the thermocline. The temperature shift refracted our acoustic signature. It heard the water displacement. He's running, Bakugo shouted. Range opening. 7,000 yards. Give me the shot, Deku. I can tag him before he gets to the shelf. Midoriya closed his eyes for a second. He visualized the 3D space. The drone was fast, but it was dumb. It would run for the noise of the canyon to hide. Helm, all ahead flank, Midoriya ordered. Ida gasped. Captain? Flank speed will cause cavitation. We'll be screaming across the sonar. I wanted to hear us, Midoriya said, opening his eyes. They were hard green flint. We're flushing the bird. Weapons, set torpedoes to active homing. Fire on my mark. The deck vibrated as the massive engines kicked in. The Delaware surged forward. Target is reacting. Uraraka called. It's turning to engage. It thinks we're charging. Target lock acquired, Bakugo yelled, his hands flying over the keypad. Tube 1 ready. Tube 2 ready. Fire 1, Midoriya said softly. Firing 1. Bakugo smashed the button. Thump whoosh. Compressed air ejected the torpedo from the tube. The wire-guided weapon screamed into the darkness. Weapon away, Bakugo reported. Wire is hot. I have control. Guided in, Kaken. And this. The crew watched the tactical display. A green dot, the torpedo, closed in on the red dot, the drone. It was a textbook kill. Impact in 10 seconds, Bakugo counted down. 5, 4, 3. Suddenly, the red dot on the screen split into 3. Countermeasures. Uraraka shouted. Decoys deployed. Damn it! Bakugo growled, wrestling with the joystick. Which one is real? The sound signature is identical. Look at the Doppler shift, Midoriya commanded, stepping up behind Bakugo. The decoys have a constant velocity. The drone is accelerating. Target the one with the shifting frequency. I see it, Bakugo snarled. He adjusted the wire. The green dot swerved, ignoring the 2 false targets. Gotcha. Boom. A dull thud resonated through the hull of the Delaware. Target destroyed, Uraraka confirmed, letting out a breath. Acoustic signature is breaking up. Good shot, Midoriya said. Secure from battle stations. Bring us back to, Captain? The sonar operator's voice pitched up, sharp with panic. Transient noise. High speed. Bearing is directly astern. Midoriya spun around. Identify. It's a torpedo, sir. But there's no other ship. Ida's face went pale. The tube, he whispered. Tube 2. Midoriya looked at the weapons board. The light for Tube 2 was flashing amber. Malfunction. Circular run. Bakugo roared, realizing the horror. The second torpedo in the tube had activated due to a sympathetic surge from the first launch. But it hadn't ejected properly. It had hung fire, then launched itself seconds later, its guidance wire severed. Without a wire, the active sonar in the nose cone had searched for the nearest large metal object. The Delaware. Torpedo in the water. Uraraka screamed. Range 400 yards. It's closing fast. It's locked onto our screw. Hard right rudder. Ida shouted. Deploy noisemakers. No! Midoriya's voice cracked like a whip, overriding the panic. Belay that? No countermeasures. The bridge crew froze. Not using countermeasures against a homing torpedo was suicide. Captain? Ida stared at him, eyes wide. The Type 88 ignores standard noisemakers, it's programmed to filter them. Midoriya spoke rapidly, his brain operating at a speed that rivaled any speed quirk. If we turn, we expose the broadside. We maximize the target profile. It's going to hit us in 10 seconds, Deku! Bakugo yelled, his hands shaking slightly over the console. Do something! Midoriya grabbed the overhead rail. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a mathematician solving a problem while the building burned down around him. Helm, center rudder! Midoriya ordered. All stop! Kill the engine! Now! All stop! The hum of the drive died. The ship coasted, momentum carrying it forward. Chief of the boat, Midoriya spoke into the intercom, his voice eerily calm. Emergency blow forward ballast tanks. Only the forward tanks. 10 seconds duration. Aye, Captain. Came the confused reply from Kirishima in the lower decks. Captain, blowing forward tanks will pitch the nose up. Ida argued. We'll stall. Execute. Midoriya shouted. A roar of compressed air. The nose of the Delaware jerked violently upward. The submarine tilted to a terrifying 45-degree angle, pointing toward the surface like a rocket. We're losing momentum. The helmsman cried. Speed dropping to 0. Now, flood aft trim tanks. Midoriya commanded. Open the vents. The weight of the water rushing into the back of the ship, combined with the air in the front, created a violent pivot point. What are you doing? Bakugo yelled, gripping his console as the deck tilted wildly. The Cobra, Midoriya whispered. The massive submarine, having lost its forward momentum, began to slide backwards, tail first, sinking rapidly into the deep. Engine back emergency full. Midoriya screamed. Cavitate the screw. The propeller spun in reverse, churning the water into a chaotic, boiling soup of bubbles and turbulence directly in front of, or rather, above them. The rogue torpedo screamed in, locked onto the sound of the Delaware. But suddenly, the Delaware wasn't where it was supposed to be. The submarine had done a vertical drift, sliding underneath its own previous position. The torpedo slammed into the massive cloud of bubbles and cavitation the reversing screw had created. The turbulent water confused its sonar seeker. It lost the lock. Brace for impact. Midoriya yelled. The torpedo passed 10 feet above their conning tower, roaring through the bubble cloud. Confused, looking for a target, it continued its circle, spiraling away into the crushing dark. It missed, Uraraka whispered, tears in her eyes. It missed. Weapons, Midoriya said, his voice straining as he held onto the rail against the steep angle of the deck. Detonate that torpedo. Now. Bakugo didn't hesitate. He keyed the destruct code. A massive explosion rocked the ocean half a mile away. The shockwaves slammed into the Delaware, shaking the hull like a toy, knocking books off shelves and sending coffee cups flying. But the hull held. The ship leveled out slowly, the groan of steel settling back into place. Silence returned to the con, heavy, terrified silence. Midoriya straightened his uniform jacket. He took a breath, pushed his unruly hair out of his eyes, and looked at his shaking crew. Helm, he said quietly. Make your depth 800 feet. All ahead 1/3. The wardroom of the JDS Delaware was small, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and old grease. A single table sat in the center, bolted to the floor. Bakugo slammed his fist onto the metal surface, denting it. You're insane! Midoriya sat opposite him, calmly stirring a cup of tea. Ida sat at the head of the table, looking pale and cleaning his glasses with frantic intensity. It was a calculated risk, Midoriya said. Calculated risk? Bakugo spat, sparks popping from his palms, a nervous tic he could never fully suppress, even on a sub where open flames were forbidden. You stalled the boat. You turned us into a sitting duck. If that drift hadn't worked, we would be debris. If we had turned and used noisemakers, Midoriya countered, his voice steady, the Type 88 would have reacquired us on the broadside. The probability of impact was 98%. My maneuver reduced it to 40. You don't fight a torpedo with math, Deku. You fight it with speed. On land, maybe. Midoriya looked up, meeting Bakugo's furious red eyes. Down here, physics is the only quirk that matters. You know that, Lieutenant. Bakugo gritted his teeth. He hated it when Deku went into captain mode. He hated it because Deku was right. Bakugo was a prodigy of violence. He understood trajectory, blast radius, and impact. But Midoriya understood the fluid dynamics of the ocean in a way that scared him. The torpedo malfunction, Ida interjected, finally putting his glasses back on. It was a failure of the tube interlocks. Engineering is analyzing it now. It shouldn't have happened, Bakugo grumbled, crossing his arms and leaning back. Shitty tech. It happened because we pushed the systems, Midoriya said. And we survived because the crew knows their jobs. You got the shot on the drone, Kakin. That was excellent work, Bakugo scoffed, looking away. Don't patronize me. I'm not. You're the best weapons officer in the fleet. Midoriya took a sip of tea. But you have to trust me when I take the con. I can't have you hesitating or second-guessing orders when metal is in the water. I didn't hesitate, Bakugo snapped. You froze for 2 seconds when I ordered the stop, Midoriya pointed out. 2 seconds is the difference between life and death down here. Bakugo opened his mouth to shout, then closed it. The sparks on his hands died down. He glared at the table. Won't happen again. Good. Midoriya stood up. I'm going to engineering. I want a full report on the tubes by 0800. The walk to engineering took Midoriya through the spine of the ship. The corridors were narrow, filled with pipes and conduits. Crew members pressed themselves against the bulkheads to let the captain pass. Captain on deck! A sailor called out. As you were, Midoriya nodded, noting the faces. Some looked tired. Some looked energized by the near-death experience. They looked at him with a mixture of awe and confusion. They knew he was quirkless. In a society where power was everything, a quirkless man commanding the Navy's deadliest weapon was an anomaly. But they had seen the math. They had felt the drift. Midoriya reached the heavy blast door at the stern. He spun the wheel and stepped into the reactor room. The temperature spiked immediately. While the rest of the sub was kept cool, engineering was sweltering. The hum here was a physical vibration that rattled the teeth. In the center of the room stood the core, a glowing cylinder of reinforced glass and lead. Inside, a swirling vortex of energy pulsed. Most nuclear submarines used uranium rods. The Delaware was different. It used a quark hybrid drive. A volatile, high-output energy source that required constant, precise thermal regulation. Lieutenant Commander Shoto Todoroki stood at the control console, his back to the door. He wasn't wearing the standard uniform jacket, just a black tank top that revealed the scar tissue on his left side. His right hand was pressed against the cooling pipe, frost spreading from his fingers to keep the coolant lines chilled. His left hand hovered near the intake manifold, radiating a gentle heat to prevent the valves from seizing up. He was the thermostat. The human control rod. Stable? Midoriya asked, stepping up beside him. Todoroki didn't flinch. The emergency reversal spiked the core temperature. We hit the red line for a moment. I had to dump a lot of ice into the secondary loop. Midoriya looked at the frost creeping up Todoroki's right arm. You're pushing yourself, Shoto. I'm fine, Todoroki said, his voice monotone. He pulled his hand back, shaking off the ice crystals. The drive responds to emotion. When the ship tilted, I felt the fear from the crew. The reactor fed off it. I had to suppress it. You saved the engine, Midoriya said. If the screw hadn't reversed when it did, we'd be dead. Todoroki turned to look at him. His heterochromatic eyes were tired. My father called the ship yesterday. Midoriya stiffened. Admiral N.G. Todoroki, Endeavor. The commander of the surface fleet. He despised the submarine service, calling it warfare for cowards who hide in the dark. What did he want? To remind me that I'm wasting my potential down here, Todoroki said, wiping sweat from his forehead. He thinks I should be on a carrier, burning villains in the open air. He doesn't understand that. This is better. Why is it better? Midoriya asked gently. Todoroki looked at the reactor core. Because down here, the fire is contained. It's used for propulsion, not destruction. And, it's quiet. No cameras. No interviews. Just the job. Midoriya smiled. We're the silent service for a reason, Captain, the intercom buzzed. It was Kaminari, the comms officer. Sir, you need to come to the radio room. Immediately. Is it a drill? Midoriya asked. No, sir. It's flash traffic. ELF transmission. Priority Alpha 1. Kaminari's voice dropped a decibel. It's encrypted with the All Might cipher. Midoriya exchanged a look with Todoroki. The All Might cipher was only used for existential threats. I'm on my way. The radio room was a closet stuffed with electronics. Denki Kaminari sat surrounded by decoding equipment, his quirk allowing him to interface directly with the encryption keys, speeding up the decryption process tenfold. It just came through on the extremely low-frequency band, Kaminari said, handing Midoriya a headset. It's a live audio feed, relayed through the buoy network. Midoriya put on the headset. Put it on speaker for the XO. Ida squeezed into the room, closing the door. Static hissed through the speakers. Then a voice. It wasn't the booming, heroic voice of the symbol of peace that the public knew. It was the voice of Toshinori Yagi, tired, strained, but filled with gravity. Aware 1, this is Fortress. Authentication, Delta Echo Kilo Union. Do you copy? Fortress, this is Delaware 1, Midoriya spoke into the mic. I read you loud and clear. Admiral? Midoriya, my boy, All Might's voice softened slightly. I'm afraid I have to interrupt your training cycle. We had a complication anyway, sir. We're listening. 3 hours ago, we lost contact with the Russian naval facility at Kamchatka. Satellite imagery shows the dry dock has been destroyed. Midoriya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean depth. The prototype heavy cruiser submarine, the Gigantomachia, is gone, All Might continued. Intel suggests the League of Villains infiltrated the base. They didn't just steal the sub, Midoriya. They have the launch keys. Nuclear? Ida whispered, horror-struck. The Gigantomachia is a Typhoon-class chassis modified with quark amplification arrays, All Might explained. It carries 20 intercontinental ballistic missiles. If they launch, they can target every major hero agency on the planet simultaneously. Where are they? Midoriya asked, his mind already pulling up charts of the North Pacific. They vanished. Their stealth tech is quark-based. We can't see them on satellite, and our surface ships can't track them through the thermal layers. They are heading southeast. We believe their target is Island. Island. Midoriya muttered. The center of quark research. If they hold that island hostage, you are the only ship in the sector with the sensors capable of tracking them, All Might said. Your mission is to locate the Gigantomachia and sink it. You are authorized for unrestricted warfare. Midoriya, they have aquatic villains in the water. This won't just be ship to ship. It will be a brawl. We can handle it, Midoriya said, his grip tightening on the microphone. I know you can. You are the finest tactician I have ever known. But be careful. The enemy captain is Shigaraki. He wants to watch the world crumble. He won't get the chance, Midoriya promised. Delaware out. The connection cut. The static returned. Midoriya took off the headset and looked at Ida and Kaminari. The playfulness of the morning's exercise was gone. The reality of their duty settled on them like a lead vest. Tenya, Midoriya said, using his first name. Sound the general alarm. Aye, Captain. Set a course for the Kamchatka Trench. Flank speed until we hit the shelf, then we go silent. And the crew? Ida asked. They're shaken from the accident. Midoriya stepped out of the radio room and grabbed the ship-wide intercom handset. He pressed the button. His voice echoed through every compartment of the 40,000-ton vessel, from the torpedo room to the reactor. This is the captain. Moments ago, we received orders from High Command. A rogue vessel under the command of the League of Villains is threatening global security. We are the only thing standing between them and thousands of innocent lives. He paused, imagining the faces of his crew. Bakugo checking his warheads. Todoroki cooling the core. Uraraka listening to the dark. I know you are tired. I know we almost broke the ship this morning. But I also know that there is no crew in this fleet I would rather go into the dark with. We are not heroes who stand in the sunlight and wave to the cameras. We are the shield that no one sees. We are the silent service. Midoriya looked at the bulkhead, his reflection staring back. A quirkless boy who became the master of the deepest ocean, rigged for ultra-quiet. Spin up the reactor. We have a villain to catch. Captain out? He hung up the phone. He looked at Ida. Let's dive. The Pacific Ocean was not a void. It was a layered cake of temperature, salinity, and pressure, a chaotic, shifting environment that actively fought against anyone trying to hide within it. To the uninitiated, the sea was just water. To Captain Izuka Midoriya, it was a three-dimensional chessboard where the pieces were blindfolded and the board itself was constantly trying to crush them. The JDS Delaware moved through the dark like a blade of obsidian. They were operating deep, skimming the top of the Emperor Seamounts chain, heading northwest toward the last known trajectory of the hijacked Gigantomachia. The atmosphere inside the boat had shifted from the adrenaline of the morning's near disaster to a heavy, suffocating focus. The general alarm had been silenced, replaced by the low-level hum of Condition 2, heightened readiness. The lights in the corridors were dimmed to a combat red, turning the faces of the crew into stark, shadowed masks. Midoriya stood in the wardroom, the small officers' mess that doubled as a tactical planning center. A holographic projector table took up most of the space, casting a ghostly blue light onto the faces of his senior staff. "Sit," Midoriya said, his voice quiet. Executive Officer Tenya Ida sat to his right, a data pad in hand, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. Weapons Officer Katsuki Bakugo slumped in the chair to the left, looking bored, though his eyes were sharp and unblinking. Master Chief Diver Tsuyu Ajui sat at the end, her posture hunched, her large eyes fixed on the map. Midoriya keyed a command into the table. A wireframe model of a massive submarine materialized in the air. It was a beast of a vessel, easily 3 times the size of the Delaware. "This is the target," Midoriya began. "The Gigantomachia. Originally a Russian Typhoon-class ballistic missile submarine. It was scheduled for decommissioning 10 years ago but was purchased by a private firm fronting for the League of Villains. They've spent the last decade retrofitting it in secret. It's a dinosaur," Bakugo scoffed, leaning forward. "Look at that hull profile. It's got the hydrodynamic efficiency of a brick. It'll be loud. We'll hear it churning water from 50 miles away." "Under normal circumstances, yes," Midoriya corrected, tapping the display. Areas of the wireframe highlighted in red. "But Intel suggests they've installed quark amplification arrays along the hull, specifically vibration-dampening emitters. We suspect they have a villain on board with a silencing quirk, someone who can nullify sound waves before they leave the hull." "A mute button for a 40,000-ton sub," Ida muttered, adjusting his glasses. "That complicates the acoustic intercept." "It gets worse," Midoriya continued. "We aren't just looking for a ship. We're looking for a mobile fortress. The Gigantomachia has 20 missile tubes. All might confirm they have the launch keys. If they reach a firing position near our island, they can level the entire research facility and the surrounding coastal cities." "So we sink it," Bakugo said, cracking his knuckles. "We find the big, quiet brick, and I'd put a Type 88 down its throat." "Simple." "Not simple," Kaken, Midoriya said, his gaze hardening. "Because they know we're coming. Shigaraki is commanding that boat. He's unstable, but he's not stupid. He knows the Delaware is the only ship in the fleet capable of tracking him. He won't just be running. He'll be hunting us back." Tsuyu Ajui spoke up for the first time, her voice rasping slightly in the dry air of the sub. "Captain, the briefing mentioned biologicals. What does that mean for my dive team?" Midoriya brought up a new image. It was a grainy satellite photo of the water around the dry dock where the Gigantomachia had been stolen. The water was churning with dark shapes. "Nomu," Midoriya said grimly. "Aquatic variants. We don't have specs, but we have to assume they are engineered for depth and pressure. They act as perimeter defense. If we get too close, they might try to board us." A silence fell over the room. Submarine warfare was supposed to be clean, impersonal. A math problem solved with torpedoes at a distance. The idea of monsters clawing at the hull brought a visceral, primal fear into the equation. "Protocol?" Ida asked, his voice tight. "If we detect boarders," Midoriya said, looking at each of them, "we purge the outer hull. Electrical discharge. If they breach, we repel boarders with small arms. But we cannot let them stop us. The mission is the Gigantomachia." Bakugo stared at the hologram of the enemy sub. For once, he didn't have a snarky comeback. He looked at the size of the enemy vessel, then at the size of their own. "David and Goliath," he grunted. "David won," Midoriya replied. "Because he knew where to aim." "Dismissed. Get to your stations. We enter the search grid in 20 minutes. The Delaware pushed deeper. Midoriya left the wardroom and made his rounds. A captain needed to be seen, especially before a battle. He walked the narrow passageways, checking the watertight doors, nodding to the enlisted sailors who were running diagnostics on the hydraulic systems. He felt the weight of their lives on his shoulders. He was 23 years old. Quirkless. And yet 70 men and women trusted him to guide them through a steel tube in a hostile ocean, hunting a floating nightmare. He stopped outside the heavy blast door of main engineering. He needed to check the heartbeat of his ship. He spun the wheel and entered. The heat hit him instantly, a dry, metallic heat that tasted of ozone and recycled air. The reactor room was a cathedral of machinery, dominated by the glowing blue pulse of the quark drive core. Shoto Todoroki was where he always was, standing on the gantry directly above the core, monitoring the flow regulators. Midoriya climbed the metal stairs, the grating ringing under his boots. Todoroki didn't turn around. He was focused on a series of gauges, his left hand glowing with a soft, orange light as he heated a stubborn valve. Core temperature is holding at 98% efficiency, Todoroki said, sensing Midoriya's presence. We have full power available for the flank run. Midoriya leaned against the railing, looking down at the swirling energy inside the glass shielding. It wasn't nuclear fission. It was a condensed plasma storm, harvested from the energy signatures of high-yield emitters and stabilized in a magnetic bottle. It was limitless power, but it was temperamental. You've been on watch for 8 hours, Shoto, Midoriya said softly. You need to rotate out. Let the backup team handle the regulation. Todoroki shook his head, his dual-colored hair matted with sweat. No. The backup team can't sense the fluctuations fast enough. If we're going into combat, the drive needs to be responsive. It needs a quirk to talk to. Midoriya watched him. He saw the fatigue etched into the lines of Todoroki's face. He saw the frostbite burns on his right arm and the heat blisters on his left. You're punishing yourself, Midoriya said. It wasn't a question. Todoroki paused. He withdrew his hand from the valve, flexing his fingers. My father is leading the surface task force, he said, his voice barely audible over the hum of the turbine. The Endeavor is steaming to intercept us if we fail. He sent a message to the fleet command. He called this mission a waste of resources. He said a submarine can't stop a villain like Shigaraki. Midoriya sighed, looking up at the complex lattice of pipes. Admirals like your father, they see warfare as a spectacle. Fire and noise. They want the world to watch them win. He hates that I'm down here, Todoroki said, looking at his scarred hand. He hates that I chose a path where he can't see me. Where his flames don't work. The ocean suffocates his fire. Is that why you chose it? Midoriya asked. Todoroki turned, his eyes mismatched and intense. I chose it because on this ship, I'm not Endeavor's son. I'm just the engineer. The machine doesn't care about my bloodline. It just cares if I do the job. Midoriya nodded. He understood that better than anyone. The ocean is the great equalizer, Shoto. It doesn't care about quirks. It creates a level playing field. That's why I'm here. Up there, he pointed toward the ceiling, toward the surface miles away. Up there, I'm just a quirkless Deku. I can't punch a building down. I can't fly. But down here? In the dark? I can outthink them. I can outmaneuver them. Down here, I can be the symbol of peace. Todoroki looked at his captain. He saw the quiet determination in Midoriya's eyes. It wasn't the blazing ego of a pro-hero. It was the cold, hard resolve of a survivor. We're going to find them, Midoriya, Todoroki said, a rare, small smile touching his lips. And when we do, I'll give you all the speed you need. Just point us in the right direction. I will, Midoriya promised. Get some water, Shoto. I need you sharp when the shooting starts. Midoriya left the engineering bay, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. His crew was broken, scarred, and hiding from the world above. But they were his. The con was quiet. Midoriya returned to the bridge, slipping back into the captain's chair. The transition from the heat of engineering to the cool, air-conditioned control room was jarring. Entering Sector 7, Ida reported from the helm. Passing the thermocline now. Very well, Midoriya murmured. Drop the Todoroki. Let's extend our ears. Deploying Todoroki, the sonar tech repeated. Midoriya turned his chair toward the sonar shack, a darkened alcove off to the side of the main control room. Lieutenant Ochako Uraraka sat there, surrounded by screens of cascading green waterfalls, visual representations of sound. She was wearing her specialized headset, a bulky device that covered her ears and eyes. Her hands hovered in the air, fingers twitching as if she were playing an invisible piano. Uraraka was the most unique asset on the Delaware. Her quirk, zero gravity, had been recontextualized. She didn't just float objects, she could float her own sensory perception, detaching her consciousness from her body and projecting it into the medium surrounding her. In the water, sound traveled 4 times faster than in air. Uraraka could ride those sound waves, extending her awareness miles beyond the hull. She was the ship's medium. A ghost in the machine. "Talk to me, Uraraka," Midoriya whispered into his comms. "What does the water tell you?" Uraraka's voice came back, dreamy and distant, as if she were speaking from a deep sleep. "The water is cold. Heavy. There's a lot of background noise. Volcanic vents to the south. Cracking shrimp. A supertanker on the surface, maybe 40 miles out. Thump, thump, thump." "Ignore the surface," Midoriya instructed. "Focus on the deep channel. Depth 1000. Look for the hole in the water. If the Gigantomachia was using dampeners, it wouldn't make a sound. It would be a silence moving through the noise. A negative space, drifting." Uraraka murmured. Her fingers danced in the air. "I feel turbulence. Unnatural flow. Bearing 220. Something large passed through here recently. It disturbed the thermal layers." Tracking the wake, Midoriya noted, glancing at the map. "Helm, come left to course 220. Slow to 5 knots. Don't spook them." The sub crept forward. The tension on the bridge ratcheted up. Every creak of the hull sounded like a gunshot. "Captain," Uraraka's voice sharpened slightly. "I'm picking up anomalies." "Biological. Whales? No." She grimaced, her head twitching. "Too erratic. Fast. Chittering sounds. High-frequency clicks. It sounds like insects. But big. Wet." Midoriya looked at Bakugo. "The Nomu. They're screening the sub," Bakugo whispered, his hand hovering over the fire control key. "Patrol dogs. They're spread out," Uraraka continued, her breathing becoming faster. "Dozens of them. Circling something. A central mass. Oh god, it's huge, Deku. It's massive." "She found it," Midoriya said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Range? 10,000 yards. It's sitting on the bottom. Silent. Waiting. They're ambushing," Midoriya realized instantly. "They know we have to pass through this trench. They're running quiet, sitting on the seabed to blend in with the rocks." "We have a firing solution?" Bakugo asked urgently. "Not yet," Midoriya said. "If we fire on a bottom sub, the interference from the rocks will confuse the seekers. We need them to move. We need them in open water." "How do we make them move?" Ida asked. "We bait them," Midoriya said. "Uraraka, keep a lock on those biologicals. If they get closer than 2,000 yards, let me know." "Captain." Uraraka's voice suddenly dropped. It wasn't dreamy anymore. It was terrified. The chittering stopped. Midoriya froze. "What?" "The biologicals. They stopped clicking. All of them. Simultaneously. Silence. Absolute, terrifying silence." "They heard us," Midoriya whispered. "Active sonar." Uraraka screamed, ripping the headset off her ears as a piercing shriek filled the room. Ping! The sound was not a ping like in the movies. It was a physical assault. A high-decibel hammer blow that slammed into the hull of the Delaware with the force of a car crash. The steel plates groaned. Dust fell from the overhead ducts. The sound wave passed through the ship, vibrating in the teeth and bones of every crew member. "We've been pinged!" Ida shouted. "High-powered active sonar! They know exactly where we are." "They aren't dampening anymore," Bakugo yelled. "They're screaming, helm! Hard right rudder!" Midoriya barked, snapping into command mode. "All ahead full! Get us off this vector! Torpedoes in the water!" Uraraka cried out, slamming her headset back on, wincing at the volume. I have 6 contacts. Fast movers. They fired a full spread. Countermeasures. Midoriya ordered. Launch noisemakers. Knuckles, release the decoys. The Delaware shuddered as the decoy canisters ejected from the hull. They exploded into chemical clouds of bubbles and noise, designed to confuse the enemy torpedoes. Torpedoes are ignoring the decoys, Uraraka reported, panic rising in her voice. They're wire-guided. The enemy captain is steering them manually, Shigaraki, Midoriya hissed. He's playing a video game with us. Time to impact 30 seconds, Bakugo. Midoriya turned to his weapons officer. Snapshot. Tube 1 and 2. Fire down the bearing of the incoming weapons. Force him to cut the wires. On it. Bakugo roared. Tube 1 fire. Tube 2 fire. The Delaware bucked as 2 heavy torpedoes left the tubes. Guide them straight down the throat. Midoriya commanded. Make him dodge. If he dodges, he has to sever the guidance wires. On the tactical display, the web of lines was chaotic. 6 red lines closing in on the Delaware. 2 green lines racing toward the massive blip of the Gigantomachia. Enemy is maneuvering. Uraraka shouted. He's blowing ballast. He's lifting off the bottom. He's cutting the wires. Bakugo yelled triumphantly. The red torpedoes are going autonomous. Now we have a chance, Midoriya said, sweat beading on his forehead. Helm dive. Dive to 1,200 feet. Get us into the cold water. We need to blind their seekers. The Delaware pitched down, groaning under the strain. The depth gauge spun rapidly. 900, 1,000. 1,100. Torpedoes 1 and 2 acquired decoys, Uraraka reported. 3 and 4 are still searching. 5 and 6 are tracking us. They're still locked? Ida gasped. They aren't sonar, Midoriya realized, his mind racing. They're wake homers. They're following the turbulence of our screw. We can't outrun a wake homer. Bakugo shouted. No, Midoriya said, his eyes narrowing. But we can confuse it. Helm. All stop. All stop. The helmsman looked terrified. Sir, we'll lose maneuverability. Do it. The engines died. The submarine coasted into the crushing dark. Engineering, Midoriya snapped into the comms. Todoroki, I need a thermal bloom. Vent the secondary coolant loop. Now, Captain, that will dump superheated water right behind us. Todoroki's voice came back, strained. It'll light us up like a flare on thermal imaging. That's the point. Do it. A massive cloud of boiling water, heated by the quark drive, vented from the rear of the submarine. It created a sudden, explosive pocket of hot, turbulent water. The wake-homing torpedoes, programmed to follow the disturbance of water, slammed into the thermal bloom. The sudden density change caused their proximity fuses to detonate prematurely. Boom! Boom! The shockwaves hammered the Delaware. The lights flickered and died, replaced instantly by emergency amber lighting. The ship rolled 20 degrees to port, throwing crew members out of their chairs. Damage report. Midoriya called out, pulling himself up from the railing. Hull integrity holding. Ida reported, checking his screen. We have minor leaks in compartment 4. We lost the towed sonar array. It was severed by the blast. We're blind aft, Bakugo cursed. Not blind, Midoriya said, wiping blood from a small cut on his cheek. We just have to look forward. Enemy status? The Gigantomachia is moving, Uraraka said, her voice shaking. They're accelerating. 20 knots, 30, 40. My God, they're fast. They aren't sticking around to finish us, Midoriya realized. They delayed us. They're running for the coast. They're heading for island. Midoriya looked at the map. The red blip of the enemy sub was pulling away, moving toward the shallow waters of the Japanese continental shelf. They think we're dead, Bakugo growled. Or crippled. Let them think that, Midoriya said softly. The fear in his chest was gone, replaced by a cold, tactical clarity. Rig for silent running, Midoriya ordered. Secure all non-essential systems. No talking. No tools dropped. We are going to crawl right up their exhaust pipe, Captain, Ida whispered. We can't catch them at silent speed. They're doing 40 knots. We don't need to catch them in the open ocean, Midoriya said, pointing to a jagged scar on the bathymetric chart. We're going to intercept them here. Ida looked at where he was pointing. The Abyssal Maw? That's an underwater canyon field. It's a graveyard of currents and volcanic vents. It's unnavigable. For a normal captain, yes, Midoriya said. He looked at Bakugo, then at Uraraka. But we are normal. Are we? Bakugo grinned, a sharp, dangerous expression in the amber light. No. We're the freaks. Set course for the Maw, Midoriya commanded. And reload Tube 1. I want a special package for Shigaraki when we see him again. The JDS Delaware corrected its list, stabilized its depth, and vanished into the silence of the deep, a ghost once more. The hunt was on. The ocean was a layer cake of secrets, and the JDS Delaware was hiding in the frosting. 850 feet down, the submarine hung suspended in the black water of the Abyssal Maw. To the uninitiated, the ocean is a singular, monolithic body of water. To a submariner, and especially to Captain Izuku Midoriya, it was a complex atmospheric system of currents, salinity gradients, and temperature differentials. Midoriya stood at the plotting table, the blue glow of the holographic chart illuminating his tired face. He hadn't slept in 24 hours. His eyes were red-rimmed, but his mind was vibrating with a cold, mathematical clarity. Depth? He whispered. Holding at 850, the helmsman whispered back. External temperature? 34 degrees Fahrenheit. We are right in the thick of it. They were riding the thermocline. In the deep ocean, there is often a sharp boundary where the warmer, mixed surface water meets the freezing, dense water of the deep. This boundary, the thermocline, acts like a mirror for sound. Sonar waves hitting it at a shallow angle would bounce off, reflecting back up toward the surface or down toward the bottom, leaving a shadow zone underneath or above the layer where a submarine could vanish. The Gigantomachia was somewhere above them, prowling the warmer waters at 400 feet. The Delaware was hiding in the cold cellar beneath the floorboards. Sonar, Midoriya murmured into his headset. Update. In the sonar shack, Lieutenant Ochako Uraraka was trembling. She had been under for too long. Her quirk, zero gravity, allowed her to float her consciousness into the acoustic net, but the pressure of the ocean weighed on her mind even if it couldn't touch her body. They're angry, Captain, Uraraka's voice came through, thin and strained. I can hear their screw churning. They're running sloppy. Cavitating. They aren't trying to hide anymore. They know we're here, Midoriya said. They just can't see us. Active sonar, Uraraka winced, pressing her hands to her headset. Ping interval is decreasing. Every 30 seconds. They're hammering the water. Ping. The sound resonated through the hull. A dull, metallic thud that felt less like a sound and more like someone hitting the submarine with a sledgehammer wrapped in velvet. It was muffled by the thermal layer, but still strong enough to rattle the teeth of the crew. Range? 4,000 yards. Closing. They're sweeping a search grid, Ida noted, standing beside Midoriya. The Exo's posture was rigid, his hands clasped behind his back to hide the fact that they were shaking. If they dip their variable depth sonar below the layer, they'll spot us instantly. They won't, Midoriya said, his eyes fixed on the bathymetric chart. The Maw is full of volcanic vents. The thermal currents down here are chaotic. If they lower a sensor, the temperature spikes will blind it. Their only option is hull-mounted sonar, and the thermocline is blinding that. So we sit here? The question came from the weapons console. Lieutenant Commander Katsuki Bakugo was vibrating with pent-up aggression. He was leaning forward, staring at his fire control screens like a predator watching prey through a fence. We wait, Midoriya corrected. Waiting is dying, Bakugo growled. They're 4,000 yards out. That's point-blank range for a wire-guided shot. I can put a torpedo through their con tower before they even know we fired. Let me shoot, Deku. If you fire, Midoriya said, not looking up from the map, the transient noise of the launch will punch right through the thermal layer. They'll have a vector on us instantly. They have 20 missile tubes, Kaken. We have 4. Do the math. I did the math. Bakugo snapped, his voice rising in volume, violating the quiet ship protocol. The math says I'm faster than them. The math says I can kill them. Keep your voice down, weapons officer, Ida hissed. Don't tell me what to do, Four Eyes. Bakugo spun his chair around. We're sitting ducks. We're hiding in a hole while Shigaraki drives a nuke over our heads. Since when is the plan to hide? Since the mission changed from engage to survive, Midoriya said calmly. He finally looked up. His green eyes were devoid of fear, which only seemed to infuriate Bakugo more. We aren't trying to sink them right now. We are trying to find out where they are going. We know where they're going. Bakugo gestured wildly at the map. Southeast. Toward Japan. That's a heading, not a destination, Midoriya countered. Is it Tokyo? Yokohama? Island? Or are they going to park in the middle of the Pacific and launch from deep water? Until we know the endgame, we don't reveal our position. Ping. The sound was louder this time. Closer. 3,000 yards, Uraraka whispered. They're turning. Coming to course 180. They're spiraling in, Ida said, sweat beading on his forehead. They're guessing. They know we're in the area. Helm, all stop, Midoriya ordered. Rig for ultra quiet. Shut down the air scrubbers. Shut down the reactor cooling pumps. We drift. The hum of the ship died. The Delaware became a tomb. Without the air scrubbers, the air would grow stale and hot within minutes. Without the cooling pumps, the quark drive would begin to heat up dangerously. It was a contest of endurance. In the engine room, the silence was deafening. Usually, the reactor room was a symphony of turbines, pumps, and rushing water. Now, it was dead quiet. The only sound was the ticking of cooling metal. Lieutenant Commander Shoto Todoroki stood before the quark drive core. The swirling plasma inside the glass containment was agitated, sensing the lack of active cooling. The temperature gauge was climbing steadily. Core temp, 104%. 105%. Chief, a junior engineer whispered, looking terrified. If we don't cycle the water, the core will destabilize in 10 minutes. I know, Todoroki said. His voice was calm, contrasting with the ice that was beginning to creep up his neck. He placed both hands on the primary intake manifold. Usually, he used his right side to cool the system. Today, he had to be the entire cooling system. Shut the valves, Todoroki ordered. Isolate the loop. I'll handle the thermal load. Sir, that's suicide. The heat exchange alone. Do it. The engineer closed the valves. The flow of water stopped. The heat from the reactor had nowhere to go but into the metal of the manifold, and into Todoroki. He gritted his teeth. He activated his right side. Frost exploded from his palm, encasing the pipe. At the same time, the ambient heat of the room pressed against him. He had to balance his internal temperature perfectly. If he got too cold, he'd pass out from hypothermia. If he let the reactor get too hot, it would melt down. He became a living heat sink. Just a little longer, Midoriya, he whispered to the empty room, watching the frost battle the steam rising from the pipes. Don't keep us waiting. Back in the con, the air was getting heavy. Carbon dioxide levels were rising slowly. Ping, 2,000 yards. They're right on top of us, Bakugo hissed. He had turned back to his console, his finger hovering millimeters above the firing key. The plastic guard was flipped up. The button was red and inviting. Deku, they're going to spot us. The magnetic anomaly detector, the volcanic rock in the maw masks our magnetic signature, Midoriya said softly. Trust the terrain, Kaken. They're opening outer doors. Uraraka's voice cut through the tension like a knife. I hear the mechanics. Tube 1 through 4. They're flooding tubes. They're shooting. Bakugo yelled. They're shooting blind. Return fire. Hold. Midoriya barked. Whoosh. 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 3 distinct sounds of compressed air discharging into the water. Torpedoes in the water. Uraraka cried. Active seekers enabled. They're circling. They're searching for a contact. The enemy wasn't aiming at them. They were clearing the baffles, firing torpedoes into the blind spots, hoping the active sonar in the weapon's nose would pick up a hidden submarine. Weapon 1 is passing overhead, Uraraka reported, her voice trembling. Weapon 2 is diving. It's diving below the layer. It's going to cross the thermocline, Ida said, gripping the plotting table until his knuckles turned white. Once it's under the layer, it'll hear us. The Delaware was silent, but it wasn't invisible to an active seeker at close range. If that torpedo crossed the cold water boundary, it would ping them, lock on, and detonate. Bakugo, Midoriya said, his voice deadly calm. We create a hole. What? Bakugo looked at him, confused. The torpedo is looking for a density change to confirm a target, Midoriya said, his mind visualizing the physics of the water. We give it a false floor. Fire a Deku canister. Set it for shallow drift, 300 feet. Above the layer? Bakugo asked. Why? Just do it. Bakugo punched the command. Decoy away. The canister ejected from the Delaware, floating upward. It crossed the thermocline, entering the warmer water above. As it did, it activated, bubbling and fizzing, creating a localized disturbance. The enemy torpedo, diving down, hit the thermocline boundary. At that exact moment, it detected the disturbance above it, the decoy. Its logic processor, confused by the temperature shift and the sudden noise, assumed the target was trying to escape to the surface. The torpedo pitched up. It abandoned its dive and chased the decoy into the warmer water. Boom! A distant explosion rocked the water above them. They hit the decoy, Uraraka breathed out. They think they got us? No, Midoriya said. They think we were shallow. They think we were hiding in the surface noise. The other torpedoes? They're breaking off, Uraraka said. The explosion scrambled the water. The Gigantomachia is accelerating. They're moving away at flank speed. A collective sigh of relief swept through the bridge, audible even over the groaning of the hull. Secure from ultra-quiet, Midoriya ordered. Restart air scrubbers. Signal engineering to resume cooling. But the tension didn't dissipate. It coalesced into a dense ball of anger at the weapons console. Bakugo stood up. His chair scraped violently against the deck. That was luck, Bakugo snarled, turning on Midoriya. That was tactics, Midoriya replied, not looking up from his logbook. Tactics? Bakugo slammed his hand onto the plotting table, causing the hologram to flicker. We sat there and let them shoot at us. We acted like cowards. I had a firing solution, Deku. I had a 90% kill probability, and a 100% probability of being destroyed by their return volley, Midoriya said, finally meeting Bakugo's gaze. So what? That's the job, Bakugo shouted. The crew froze. To yell at the captain on the bridge was a court-martial offense. We take the hit to sink the target. That's what heroes do. We don't hide in the mud while the villain gets away. We are not heroes. Midoriya's voice rose, cracking the calm facade he had maintained for hours. He stepped off the comm platform, walking until he was inches from Bakugo's face. Midoriya was shorter, less physically imposing, but in that moment, he seemed to tower over the explosive blonde. We are naval officers, Midoriya said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. Heroes on the surface can afford to trade blows. They can smash buildings and break bones because they have backup. Down here? There is no recovery, girl. There is no backup. If this hull breaches, 70 people die. My job isn't to satisfy your need for glory, Lieutenant. My job is to complete the mission and bring this crew home. The mission was to sink the sub. Bakugo yelled back, smoke curling from his palms. And you let it go. The mission, Midoriya said, stepping closer, invading Bakugo's personal space, is to stop the threat. Sinking them here, in deep water, where we can't confirm the kill, where their payload might detonate and poison the ocean for 1,000 years. That is reckless. You're just scared, Bakugo spat. You've always been scared. You're still the quirkless little. That's enough. Ida shouted, stepping forward. Midoriya held up a hand to stop Ida. He didn't break eye contact with Bakugo. I am scared, Midoriya admitted. The admission stunned Bakugo into silence. I am terrified. Because I know exactly how much pressure is pushing against this hull. I know the crush depth of this vessel down to the inch. I know the odds. Midoriya's expression hardened into steel. But I do not let that fear make my decisions. And I will not let you make decisions based on your anger. On this ship, my word is law. Not because I'm stronger than you. Not because I have a quirk, but because I am the captain. And until you are relieved of duty, you will follow my orders. Do I make myself clear, weapons officer? The silence stretched. It was heavy, thick with years of rivalry and unspoken history. The crew watched, breathless. Bakugo's hands were clenched into fists, trembling. The explosions were right there, under his skin, begging to be let out. He looked at Midoriya. He saw the nerd he had grown up with. But he also saw the man who had just outsmarted a homing torpedo with a math problem. He saw the man who hadn't flinched when the depth charges went off. Bakugo unclenched his fists. He let out a ragged breath, looking away. Crystal, Bakugo muttered. I can't hear you, Lieutenant, Midoriya said coldly. Bakugo snapped his head back, his eyes blazing. Aye, Captain. Crystal clear. Good. Midoriya stepped back, the tension in his shoulders dropping slightly. Now sit down. We have work to do. Bakugo sat. He looked furious, but he sat. Status on the Gigantomachia? Midoriya asked, returning to the plotting table as if the near mutiny hadn't happened. They're gone, Uraraka said, her voice small. Moving southeast at 40 knots. They aren't running silent anymore. Why? Ida asked. Why break stealth? Because they don't think they need it, Midoriya said, looking at the large map of the Pacific. He traced the line of the enemy's course. They cleared the ambush point. They think they either sank us or left us behind in the dust. Where are they going? Bakugo asked, his voice gruff but controlled. Midoriya extended the line on the map. It didn't point to Tokyo. It pointed to a small, isolated dot in the ocean, surrounded by a mobile barrier reef. Island, Midoriya said. The floating city? Ida gasped. That's where the support item expo is being held. The population density is, and the research labs, Midoriya added. Island holds the data for the quirk amplification device. If Shigaraki gets his hands on that technology, he won't just launch nukes. He'll turn the Gigantomachia into a quirk-generating weapon of mass destruction. We have to warn them, Ida said. We can't, Midoriya shook his head. The Gigantomachia is jamming all frequencies. If we surface to transmit, we lose time. And we are already behind. How far behind? Bakugo asked. At their speed? 2 hours, Midoriya calculated. They'll reach the firing position before we get within torpedo range. So we lost, Bakugo said, defeat creeping into his tone. No, Midoriya said. He zoomed in on the map. Between their current position and island lay a treacherous stretch of ocean floor. A nightmare of underwater canyons, razor-sharp ridges, and unstable currents. The abyssal maw connects to the Dragon's Teeth Trench, Midoriya said. It's a shortcut. But it's considered unnavigable for a vessel of this size. Unnavigable means you die if you try, Ida pointed out. It cuts 3 hours off the travel time, Midoriya said. He looked around the room. At Ida, the by-the-book warrior. At Uraraka, the exhausted censor ghost. At Bakugo, the rabid wolf on a leash. We can't catch them on the open sea, Midoriya said. So we have to go through the teeth. That's suicide, Ida whispered. The currents alone. It's a canyon run, Bakugo said, staring at the map. A slow, terrifying grin began to spread across his face. High speed. Close quarters. No room for error. He looked at Midoriya. You think you can drive this bus through there? I can, Midoriya said. But I need the best gunner in the fleet to clear the path. There are mines in that trench. Old war relics. We'll be dodging rocks and explosives at 30 knots. Midoriya held Bakugo's gaze. Can you get me the shot, Kaken? Bakugo snorted. He leaned back in his chair, putting his boots up on the console again. The anger was gone, replaced by the thrill of the impossible. Just drive the boat, nerd, Bakugo smirked. I'll clear the trash. Midoriya nodded. He hit the intercom button. Engineering, this is the captain. Todoroki here, came the weary reply. The core is stabilized. We're ready. Shoto, give me everything you've got. Override the safety limiters on the turbine. Understood. Flank speed engaged. Helm, Midoriya ordered. Course 150. Enter the trench. The JDS Delaware shuddered as the massive engine kicked into overdrive. The deck tilted. The hum became a roar. Midoriya looked at the black screen of the periscope. He didn't need to see the surface. He knew exactly where he was going. Let's go hunting. The ocean floor was not a flat, sandy plain. In the region known as the Dragon's Teeth, it was a graveyard of geology. Here, The tectonic plates had gnashed against each other for millennia, throwing up jagged spires of obsidian rock that reached up from the abyss like serrated knives. Thermal vents spewed superheated, mineral-rich black smoke into the crushing dark, creating turbulent columns of water that could flip a submarine end over end, and the JDS Delaware was tearing through it at 35 knots. Course correction! Captain Izuka Midoriya's voice was the only thing anchoring the bridge crew to reality. Come right, steer course 155. Down 5 degrees on the bow planes. Thread the needle. Right full rudder. The helmsman shouted, his hands white-knuckled on the yoke. Diving planes down, the 40,000-ton submarine banked like a fighter jet. The deck tilted violently to the starboard side. Books, coffee mugs, and loose styluses that hadn't been secured slid across the room, crashing against the bulkheads. On the 3D bathymetric display, the red walls of the underwater canyon seemed to close in. The Delaware was a blue speck navigating a maze of death. Clearance to port wall, 50 feet, Lieutenant Ochako Uraraka reported from the sonar shack. Her voice was tight, high-pitched. She wasn't just reading a screen. She was feeling the rock face brush against her sensory net. Clearance to starboard, 30 feet. Captain, the current is pushing us into the wall. Compensate, Midoriya ordered, his eyes locked on the wireframe map. Port engine ahead flank. Starboard engine back 1/3. Twist the ship. Twisting the ship. The submarine shuddered as the differential thrust kicked in. The tail swung out, missing a razor-sharp outcropping of rock by mere meters. The hull groaned, a deep, resonant sound of steel under immense stress. We're through the first gate, Midoriya exhaled, wiping a bead of sweat from his temple. Status on the reactor? Temperatures climbing, came the voice of Lieutenant Commander Shoto Todoroki from the intercom. We're running hot, Midoriya. The water intake filters are clogging with silt from the vents. Cooling efficiency is down to 70%. Keep it together, Shoto, Midoriya said. We can't slow down. If we slow down, the currents in this trench will smash us against the rocks. I know, Todoroki replied, his voice strained. Just get us through. Midoriya looked at the clock. They had been in the dragon's teeth for 40 minutes. They had shaved an hour off their intercept time, but the cost was high. The ship was taking a beating. Approaching the minefield, Ida warned, standing over the navigation table. Intel from the last war indicates this sector was seeded with echo mines. Acoustic triggers. Bakugo. Midoriya turned to the weapons officer. You're up. Katsuki Bakugo was grinning. It wasn't a happy grin. It was the rictus of a man who was finally allowed to break something. He had the high-frequency sonar display routed directly to his fire control console. ICM, Bakugo growled. Nasty little rusty bastards. Floating at depth 600. Tethered to the bottom. Clear a path, Midoriya ordered. Use the pulse lasers. Short bursts. Don't detonate them if you don't have to. Just cut the tethers and let them float to the surface. Boring, Bakugo muttered, but his fingers flew across the controls. The Delaware was equipped with a localized point defense system, blue-green lasers designed to superheat water and detonate incoming torpedoes. Against stationary mines, they were surgical scalpels. ZZT. ZZT. Outside the hull, invisible beams of energy lashed out. Tether cut on Contact 1, Bakugo reported. Contact 2, cut. Contact 3, detonate. A dull thump rocked the ship. I said cut the tethers. Ida snapped. It was too close. Bakugo shouted back without looking up. Drifting right into our intake. I vaporized it. You're welcome, Four Eyes. Focus! Midoriya barked. We have a density layer coming up. The sonar picture is going to get fuzzy. The submarine sped on, weaving through the floating minefield like a skier on a slalom course. Midoriya was in a trance state. He was mumbling his specific quirk, his analytical mind, processing vectors, drag coefficients, and current speeds faster than the ship's computer could. Left 2 degrees, up plane, counteract the downdraft, stabilize. Suddenly, a violent metallic clang reverberated through the hull. It didn't sound like an explosion. It sounded like a massive hammer striking an anvil. The ship lurched, slewing sideways. The speed dropped instantly from 35 knots to 20. Report! Midoriya shouted, grabbing the rail to stay upright. Collision alarm! Ida yelled. We hit something. Drag on the starboard side. We're pivoting. Did we hit the wall? No wall contact. Uraraka screamed. It's attached to us. Something snagged the hull. Midoriya looked at the damaged control board. Where? Starboard diving plane, Uraraka said, her hands pressing against her temples as she focused her quirk. It's a cable. A high-tensile mooring cable. We snagged a mine tether. The bridge went deathly silent. They hadn't hit the mine. They had hit the wire holding it to the ocean floor. The mine was now being dragged behind them, or worse, it was being pulled down toward the hull. Bakugo, status on that mine. Bakugo was frantically adjusting his sensors. I can't see it. It's in the blind spot of the sail. If it's snagged on the starboard plane, the mine is trailing right alongside the hull. If it touches the hull. Ida whispered. Boom, Bakugo finished. And at this depth, with the pressure? The hull breach triggers a catastrophic implosion. We're a crushed soda can. Can we shake it loose? Midoriya asked. Negative, Ida said, looking at the physics simulation. The cable is wrapped around the hydroplane. If we speed up, the tension might snap the plane off. If we slow down, the mine swings forward and hits us. So we're stuck, Bakugo snarled. Dragging a bomb through a canyon, Midoriya closed his eyes. He took a breath. Inhale. Exhale. We have to cut it, he said. With the lasers? Bakugo asked. I don't have the angle. The diving plane blocks the line of fire. Not with the lasers, Midoriya said. He opened his eyes. They were calm. Manually, he hit the intercom. Master Diver Ajiri to the bridge. Immediately, Tsuyu Ajiri did not look like a typical naval commando. She was slim, with wide, frog-like eyes and a posture that always seemed ready to spring. But on the Delaware, she was royalty. She was the Master Chief of the Deep Submergence team. She entered the con 2 minutes later, wearing her undersuit. She looked at the holographic display, saw the snagged cable, and nodded once. Karo, she said softly. That's a bad spot. Can you do it? Midoriya asked. The pressure is 1200 psi, Tsuyu said, analyzing the data. The current is 30 knots relative. If I go out there, I'll be fighting the water like it's solid concrete. We can slow to 10 knots, Midoriya said. Any slower, and we lose steerage in the canyon. 10 knots. Tsuyu tapped her chin. I can't use the standard umbilical. The drag would snap my neck. I'll have to use the magnetic boots and the hard suit. The hard suit, an atmospheric diving suit ADS. It was essentially a one-person wearable submarine, an exoskeleton of reinforced titanium capable of withstanding abyssal pressures while keeping the pilot at 1 atmosphere. It'll be clumsy, Tsuyu warned. The hard suit doesn't have my dexterity. And cutting a high-tensile cable with hydraulic claws while moving. I know it's asking the impossible, Midoriya said. He stepped down from the con and stood in front of her. But you're the only one who can survive out there. Tsuyu looked at him. She saw the worry in his eyes. She smiled, a small quirk of her lips. I'm a frog, Captain. I'm good in water. Get the plasma cutter ready. Suit up, Midoriya ordered. Ida, take the con. I'm going to the airlock to monitor the EVA. Captain, you should stay on the bridge. Ida protested. No, Midoriya said, walking toward the door with Tsuyu. If she's out there risking her life, I'm going to be the voice in her ear. I need to see what she sees. The escape trunk was located midships. It was a small, cramped steel chamber. In the center stood the hard suit. It was painted a matte dark green. It looked like a suit of medieval armor bulked up on steroids. The helmet was a dome of thick acrylic. The arms ended in complex manipulator claws. Tsuyu climbed into the suit with practiced ease. The mechanic sealed the heavy titanium chest plate. Midoriya stood by the comms panel, watching through the thick glass of the internal hatch. Comms check, Midoriya said. Read you 5x5, Captain. Tsuyu's voice came through the speaker, tinny but calm. Systems green. Oxygen full. Scrubbers active. I'm ready to get wet. Flooding the chamber, Midoriya said. He turned the valve. Water roared into the escape trunk. It swirled around the hard suit, rising rapidly until the green armor was submerged. Pressure equalizing, Midoriya narrated. Outer door opening. On the monitor, the dark ocean rushed in. The lights of the escape trunk illuminated the rushing particulate matter outside, marine snow flying past like streaks of warp-speed stars. I'm stepping out, Tsuyu said. The hard suit stomped forward. The magnetic boots engaged with a heavy clang against the hull plating. Wind is strong, Tsuyu commented. She meant the water current. At 10 knots, the water pressure against the suit was immense. She was walking into a hurricane. I'm securing my safety line. Moving aft toward the starboard plane, Midoriya watched the camera feed from her helmet. It was a chaotic blur of black water and gray steel. The hull of the submarine stretched out like a curved metal planet. Take your time, Tsuyu. Step by step. If I take too much time, we hit a rock, she replied. I'm moving. In the engine room, time was running out. Intake blockage is at 80%, the junior engineer shouted over the roar of the alarms. We're suffocating the drive. Shoto Todoroki stood on the gantry, his hands clenched on the railing. The ambient temperature in the room was passing 120 degrees. The heat shielding on the reactor core was glowing a dull cherry red. The silt and debris from the canyon had clogged the external vents. The reactor couldn't cycle cool ocean water fast enough to keep up with the demands of the engine and the immense heat being generated. We have to flush the intakes, Todoroki said. We can't, the engineer cried. The flush system requires back pressure. We can't generate it while the screw is turning. If we stop the screw, the captain loses steerage and we crash, Todoroki said. He wiped sweat from his eyes. His vision was blurring. Then we have to scram the reactor. Shut it down. No, Todoroki said firmly. If we kill the power, the magnetic boots on the diver's suit will fail. Azuri will be swept away. He looked at the core. The plasma was angry, roiling violently. I'm going inside, Todoroki said. The engineer froze. Sir? The radiation. It's not radiation, Todoroki corrected. It's pure thermal energy. The shielding protects you from the heat. If I go inside the primary containment ring, I can apply my ice directly to the coolant loop. You'll cook. The ambient temp inside the ring is 400 degrees. My fire side can handle the ambient heat, Todoroki said, unzipping his uniform jacket and tossing it aside. My ice side will cool the pipes. Commander, this is insane. Open the maintenance hatch, Todoroki ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. That's an order. The engineer, shaking, typed the code. The heavy lead door at the base of the reactor hissed open. A blast of heat like a dragon's breath rolled out, scorching the paint on the far wall. Todoroki took a breath. He summoned his ice, coating his right side in a thick layer of frost armor. He summoned his fire, letting his left side glow white-hot to match the environment he was entering. He stepped into the inferno. Outside, on the hull of the Delaware, Tsuyu Azuri was fighting a war of inches. Every step was a battle. The water smashed against the hard suit, trying to rip her off the hull. The magnetic boots held, but the metal of the ship was slick with algae and slime. I see it, Tsuyu said, her voice strained with effort. Through the camera, Midoriya saw the tangled mess. The steel cable was wrapped 3 times around the base of the starboard diving plane, a massive wing of steel jutting out from the hull. Trailing behind it, invisible in the darkness but terrifyingly close, was the mine. The cable was taut, vibrating like a guitar string from the tension. It's dug in deep, Tsuyu reported. The tension is immense. If I cut it, the snapback might hit the suit. Be careful, Tsuyu, Midoriya whispered. Can you reach it? I have to crawl out onto the plane itself, she said. The magnets won't hold as well on the curved surface. She moved forward. Clang. Clang. Slide. Suddenly, the submarine hit a pocket of turbulence. The ship dropped 50 feet in a second. Tsuyu gasped as the deck fell away beneath her. For a terrifying moment, she was weightless, suspended in the wash. Then the ship slammed back up. Clang. She landed on one knee, her manipulator claw gouging a scratch into the hull. I'm okay, she wheezed. Karo. That was rough. We're entering a narrow pass, Midoriya warned. I have to bank the ship. I'm going to tilt the deck away from you to give you better leverage. Hang on. Ready. The Delaware rolled to port. Tsuyu was now on the high side of the ship. She used the slope to help her slide down toward the diving plane. She reached the tangle. She extended the right arm of the suit. A plasma cutting torch ignited at the tip of the claw, a brilliant blue flame in the darkness. Starting the cut, she said. The cable is thick. Reinforced weave. Sparks flew, instantly extinguished by the water but glowing briefly like fireflies. The torch chewed into the cable. 50%. Suddenly, a red light flashed on Midoriya's console. Tsuyu! Proximity alert! The mine is drifting closer. The reduced speed is causing it to catch up to us. Midoriya checked the rear camera. Out of the gloom, a dark, bulbous shape studded with sensors emerged. It was bobbing directly toward Tsuyu's position. I see it, Tsuyu said, her voice surprisingly calm. It's big. Abort! Midoriya shouted. Get clear! If that thing touches the plane while you're there. If I abort, it hits the propeller, Tsuyu said. I have to finish. She didn't pull back. She shoved the torch deeper into the cable. 70%. The mine was 10 feet away. 5 feet. It looked like a rusted sea monster coming to eat her. Come on! Tsuyu grunted. Snap! With a sound like a gunshot that vibrated through the water, the cable parted. The tension released instantly. The heavy steel wire whipped back. It struck the shoulder of Tsuyu's hard suit with the force of a wrecking ball. Ah! Tsuyu cried out as the impact spun her around. The magnetic boots lost their grip. Tsuyu! Midoriya screamed. She was tumbling off the diving plane, sliding toward the abyss. The mine, now free, drifted harmlessly past the tail of the sub, missing the propeller by inches. Tsuyu slammed her manipulator claw down. The tip dug into the steel of the hull, carving a furrow, slowing her slide. She came to a halt on the very edge of the casing, her legs dangling over the side into the black water. I'm secure, she panted. Damage to left shoulder servo. But I'm attached. Midoriya slumped against the bulkhead, his heart hammering so hard he thought it would crack his ribs. Mine is clear, he reported to the bridge. Bakugo? I see it. Bakugo's voice came over the comms, sounding eager. It's drifting aft. Clear of the ship. Detonate it. With pleasure. A second later, a flash of light lit up the ocean behind them. The shockwave pushed the Delaware forward, a gentle shove compared to the violence of the last few minutes. Get inside, Tsuyu, Midoriya said softly. Come home. On my way, Captain. Karo. Inside the reactor core, Shoto Todoroki was burning. The heat was unimaginable. Even with his fire quirk regulating his body temperature, the air felt like solid lead. His skin was blistering, but his right hand was a glacier. He gripped the intake pipe, pumping every ounce of ice he could generate into the metal. The frost spread, fighting the red-hot glow. Steam. Massive clouds of steam hissed from the pipe joints, filling the cramped maintenance crawlspace. Come on, Todoroki gritted his teeth. Cool down. He thought of his father. Endeavor always talked about prominence burn, about pushing the heat to the limit to destroy an enemy. Todoroki was doing the opposite. He was pushing the cold to the limit to save his friends. Prominence. Freeze. A wave of absolute zero cold exploded from his body. It flash froze the blockage in the intake filter. The ice expanded, cracking the silt and rock that had clogged the vents. Crack. The blockage shattered. The pressure of the ocean blew the debris clear. Suddenly, cool water rushed into the system. The red warning lights on the panel outside turned amber, then green. Todoroki slumped against the hot metal wall. His vision went black. He had done it. The heavy door hissed open. 2 engineers in protective suits rushed in, dragging him out of the Hell's Cape. Medical! One of them shouted. Get a medic to engineering. The commander is down. Midoriya sprinted from the escape trunk to engineering. He arrived just as the medics were laying Todoroki on a stretcher. The scene was gruesome. Todoroki's uniform pants were melted to his legs. His left side was cherry red with burns, while his right side was white with severe frostbite. He was shivering violently, caught between 2 extremes. Shoto! Midoriya knelt beside him. Todoroki opened one eye. It was hazy. Did we clear the trench? He rasped. We're almost out, Midoriya said, gripping his friend's uninjured shoulder. You saved the ship. The temperature is dropping. Good, Todoroki whispered. My old man would be pissed. I used his fire to fix a plumbing problem. He passed out. Get him to the infirmary, Midoriya ordered, his voice trembling. Stabilize him. I want hourly updates. As they wheeled him away, Midoriya stood in the hallway for a moment. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. This was the cost. This was the pressure. It wasn't just the water outside. It was the weight of asking his friends to die for the mission. Captain, Ida's voice came over the comms. We are approaching the exit of the dragon's teeth. Open water in 2 minutes. Midoriya straightened his back. He pushed the guilt down into a cold, hard box in his mind. He would deal with it later. Right now, he had a villain to catch. On my way, Midoriya said. Midoriya walked onto the con. The mood was subdued. The crew knew what had happened in engineering. They knew Tsuyu had almost been lost. Status, Midoriya said, taking the chair. We are clearing the canyon, Ida reported. Depth 1200 feet. Speed 30 knots. Reactor efficiency? Holding at 80%, the new engineering watch officer reported. But without Commander Todoroki, we can't push to flank speed again. We risk a meltdown. Understood, Midoriya said. Maintain 30 knots. Captain, Uraraka called out. Her voice was tired but clear. I have a contact. The screen flickered. A faint line appeared on the tactical display. Bearing 130, Uraraka said. Range 40 miles. It's them. The Gigantomachia. We caught them, Bakugo said. He didn't shout. He sounded tired but focused. They slowed down, Ida noted. Why? They're preparing to launch, Midoriya realized. They've reached their firing position. They think they're safe. Midoriya looked at the map. They were close. So close. But 40 miles was still a long way for a torpedo shot. We need to close the distance, Midoriya said. And we need to do it without them hearing us. We can't run silent at 30 knots, Bakugo pointed out. We won't run silent, Midoriya said. We're going to run loud. We're going to scream right at them. Sir, they think we're dead, Midoriya said. Or they think we're hours behind. When we pop up on their sonar, they're going to panic. And panic makes people make mistakes. He looked at the forward screen. The dark water seemed to lighten slightly. Prepare for battle stations, Midoriya ordered. Torpedo room, load the Type 88s. Load the howitzer package. The howitzer? Bakugo perked up. You want to use my special mod? It's the only thing that can punch through their hull, Midoriya said. We have one shot, Kaken. Make it count. With pleasure. Midoriya looked at the chronometer. Take us to Deep 1, he ordered. Let's finish this.